Greetings, BlazeLeeDragon here, and today I have for you Introduction to Magic Part 3. Now, I have talked about, speaking of not only a little bit about how things work, but I've also mentioned about why the big secret. Why will no one talk about magic or share their practices or, whatnot? So, there's many reasons. First of all, I'm going to share with you some opinions that I've heard from other people, my own opinion, as well as theory. So this is kind of an accumulation throughout the years of why people do not share what they practice magically or believe in. So, first and foremost, one of the ancient reasons, see I can't talk today, is that in the past, and even today in present times, when you performed magic, when you did the act, the rite of magic, it brought forth energy. Now, in order for this to be potent and effective, you needed to A, forget about it, and B, as a secondary reason, you didn't want other people to think about it. Now, why? Because when you put out energies out there, they're very subtle vibrations, okay? It's very similar to the butterfly effect, which I'll probably relate back to again later, where if a butterfly flaps its wings, it can create hurricanes miles away. These subtle ripples and changes in vibration can bring about change. So one of the techniques for magic is to build up all this energy, sometimes in a circle, and you gather all this vibrational energy, which the circle is more of a sphere, I'll get into that later. And when you have all this energy and you release it out into the world, you're supposed to forget about it. If not, you're holding those energies back, because we're talking about subtle vibrations of the mind. I've mentioned before that one of the key principles of magic is all energy follows thought. So if you're thinking of it, it's not going about its business doing what it needs to do. So if you tell other people, they're going to start thinking about it, so they're also drawing it in. So if you don't forget about it and they don't forget about it, it can affect it. Another reason why people don't share is because in case, let me give you an example, ancient tribes. If you have a certain tribe who is dependent upon their crop, so they cast a spell for the rain to fall. If you have a rival can't talk like I said, if you have a rival tribe who's aware of this and they know you depend upon that, of course they're going to try to counter that spell. By being aware of it being casted and how you cast it, it'll be easier for them to counteract that. So there's the whole secrecy, okay? There is a book, really good book, that is about witchcraft. And in the witchcraft, he includes the 4 words of the Magus. Now, Magus, mage, magi, comes from what I understand from my research, Zoroaster. A few thousand years ago, back in BCE, before Common Era, there was this person known as Zoroaster. Dogs are coming up steps. And Zoroaster, well, I'll get into him later. You can research him. My point is that's where the term magic came from. So Magus is not necessarily the same thing as witch, but we're not going to get into terms right now. I want to get into practice. So the 4 words of the Magus are to know, to dare, to will, to keep silent. So, and there's a certain speech that goes with that on how, in order to know, we must dare. In order, we must will to possess empire, to reign, we must keep silent. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that too much. My point is, to keep silent was one of their doctrines for many magical practitioners, and that has to do with what I was just saying. You don't want other people to know about it for the sake of counteracting or drawing attention to these subtle vibrations. You don't want to screw up these subtleties. You want to allow them to just go. The other part is, when you practice magic, especially when you start getting into the really, I don't want to say supernatural because all magic is natural, but when you start getting into the stuff that seems like miracles, then you start talking about practices that are extremely sacred that took years to develop. These are the ones that most of society does not know about, because first and foremost, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you are going to sit here and say, oh, hey, here's a spell, it's thousands of years old, and I'm going to practice it. Well, it didn't work. I guess magic's not real. Magic is something just like anything else. You develop. See, I can't talk. You develop your psychic body You develop your psychic mind, you develop the other realms and ways to travel into it and interact with it. And the more you develop and the more you practice at this, the better you get. So a lot of these spells has to do with knowledge and wisdom and things you gain through time. It's not something that's just handed to you in a book or through a video. I can't sit here and tell you things that I might necessarily practice that, are just way out there, because you could try it and it's not going to work. I could record myself doing something and it's not, there's video editing, there's photo editing, subtle energies are things that you sense and interact with. It doesn't do any good for someone on YouTube to give you this wisdom or knowledge. It doesn't do any good to write it down in a book. This type of wisdom and this type of magic is gained through years of study with a master. So when you're talking about witchcraft, when you're talking about mages, sorcerers, when you're talking about magicians, druids, these are things that have high level of magic that, maybe you can consider it to be miracle-like work that they do, that they've developed through years of training. This is not something that you're going to get out of a book or off of a video. I think I've repeated that 3 times now. That's where all the secrecy comes from. You've got your individuals who want to make sure it's effective. You have your individuals who don't want it to be blocked. You have your individuals who know they can't just give it to you. Then you have your individuals who are protective of their sacredness. I believe the Druids have a really excellent way of saying it. The reason that the Druid tradition was passed mouth to mouth and it was always an oral tradition is because if you write something down, it can be blasphemized, you can, have critics, you can have it criticized, you can have it torn apart. You then have your enemy tribes, other people that are against you, knowing your secret ways. You just don't share that. It's the same way that, governments don't share about their secret operatives and how they gather research and information. That's top secret. Same thing spiritually. What you develop spiritually is yours. It's not supposed to be shared and flaunted. I might as well get naked and dance around naked in front of you. Which, there are some of those that are comfortable being naked, and it's not a big deal for them to show it off. So my point is, it's sacred, it's special to you. That's why people are not sharing it with you. That's why you don't see it everywhere. So how do you learn that kind of stuff? You either find it for yourself by looking within, or you find yourself a master or teacher, or you just practice the basics from what you do know from books or talking to others. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, ultimately speaking, you have to ask yourself what you're trying to get out of it. There are teachers out there. I found a Taoist magic teacher who actually does instructions, and I believe he charges a couple $100s a month. And some of you might be like, whoa, that's, a lot. Well, what are you trying to get? This is, someone who's had these teachings passed on for thousands of years who can trace it back to, Lao Tzu probably. I don't know for sure because I didn't do that much research after I found out the price, because, the economy does suck. But you've got to look at stuff like that. You've also got to look at, do they have, if you do find a teacher or someone that you could learn from, whether it's through witchvox.com or on YouTube or in person, do they have something to offer you and teach you? And you don't want to be judgmental necessarily, but I mean, is this someone who's going to teach you everything they know in a couple of months? Or is it someone who actually has a couple-year curriculum that's going to develop you from the ground up and have you get somewhere? Also, what is your purpose of pursuing magic? These are things you have to consider. But there's a reason for the secrecy. And a lot of covens, a lot of groups, a lot of groves, seed groups, gatherings, they have you swear oaths to keep things secret. They don't want you to just hand this stuff around. Wisdom and knowledge is power. It's the only true power in this world. I mean, if you think about it even in a job setting, the more knowledge and wisdom you have, the more valuable you are to that job. Granted, that type of wisdom we do share. And once again, if you think about computers and compare that to magic, if you have someone who's trained in computers and can build them from the ground up, and they know what a central processing unit is, how much data can be transferred through the bus, They know how much RAM to put in there, how to change out the RAM, what DDR2 versus DDR3 is, and the different speeds, and what quad core versus a dual core. You have all this information. That kind of person's going to be able to get in there, and then they'll have to go up to the next level and know software and how the software communicates, and how to get into there and do alterations as far as booting up and setting up, and possibly setting up multiple drives or a RAID. What the point is with that, it's the same thing with magic. You don't just say, hey, jump on in and do what you want to my computer. You studied for a few months. You grow into that. And then you start having trades and business practices similar to cooking. You have a certain recipe that's your guarded secret and recipe. Same thing goes with magic and mysticism. These groups, these covens, these family traditions, that's their personal thing, personal path. They're not going to share that with you. They're not going to want to. That's something sacred to them. And unless you prove worthy in what's considered worthy in their eyes, they're not going to train you. The old Shaolin temple wouldn't let just anyone in. You could stand outside the doors for months and years and still not be accepted. They want to teach those that show the sign, show the spark. So, good luck finding a teacher. They are out there. That's why there's the secrecy. And it makes a lot of sense. Now, the last reason I want to talk about secrecy is going to get into a little bit about, I've mentioned ritual tools and how they're used. And I'm only going to do it briefly, and I'm going to do it barely, and it's going to be very generic, which ties into the reason. So, well, there's two reasons for this. The first reason is, if I tell you that this stick right here, all things considered, this is a wooden stick. That's what it is. If I tell you this wooden stick can be used to heal, to protect, to banish negativity or an entity that you do not want around you, some of you are going to say you're crazy. Some of you are going to be like, it's a stick. Other ones are you are going to be like, yeah, I can think of a few ways to do that myself. Some of you will be like, ooh, teach me, I want to learn that. There's going to be different reactions. When you present stuff that is sacred to you and is belief, all belief is blind faith. Blind. You feel it, you know it inside. I could sit here and wave this stick, do a chant, cast a few spells, throw on the robes that I showed you in, intro 2, I think it was. I could do all that kind of stuff. That's not necessarily going to give you the experience of holding a wand. What is going through my body? What interaction and effect it has? Some of you could probably disprove it and, say, well, this is this and that's that, and that was circumstantial and it was just chance. That's the point. When it comes to belief, faith, and what you personally feel about something, it can be counteracted, argued against, made fun of, etc. So people don't like to share because they don't want to be put on the spot. This is a belief system. What if I told you that I now have great power because of a man died and raised from the dead, so he's now the undead and was able to purify me because of me following this undead savant? Some of you might be saying that's evil, some of you might be saying this and that. Guess what? That's the same story of Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, rising from the dead and cleansing you of your sins. It all depends on perspective. Anything that you look at is technically psychotic in a way, messed up. So some of you atheists might be like, yeah, it's all crazy. It's belief. So a lot of people aren't going to share it, not to look like an idiot. The other reason that people don't necessarily want to share these things is, once again, when I was talking about the coven, same thing with solitary practitioners or people who are not part of groups. They don't want to tell you what they practice. It's their thing. They developed it. It's their recipe. It's the way that they use it. I'm not going to tell you too much about what I do or how I do it because I don't want you to mimic or mirror me. Be you. Find your own way. Find what makes sense to you and calls to you in your heart. There's no set way of doing stuff. Let me tell you about martial arts a little bit. There is a martial arts technique known as a jab, okay, which is, just your hands are up, you pretty much punch out towards the person, okay? There are multiple ways of throwing that jab. First of all, you can have a sun fist inverted like this so it's straight up and down. I don't know how big the scene is because I'm looking at the front of the camera. So that you can see me, this is not like a real punch. But your fist can be like this. You can do a slight downward pivot to hit with the top knuckles, slight upward to hit with the bottom. You can rake inward slightly with them. You can slightly go backwards as a back fist. You can go pretty much straight on. You can turn the fist over. You can turn the fist over this way. And then there's different hitting surfaces. So there's not one way. You can punch the face, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the jaw. You would adjust it and adapt it. So these different types of techniques, same thing applies for magic. What you concentrate on, what you focus on, what you say, what you visualize, how you move the wand. There are elemental symbols. Each different tradition, as I mentioned in my last video. You have your Hindu, elements, and I don't remember all the Hindu names, but you've heard of the Aether spirit. Akasha comes from Hinduism in India. That's actually where those 5 elements come from. But you have earth, air, fire, water, and aether. That's one set of... So a normal person would actually check the battery before he starts recording and has it cut off on him. So anyway, so like I was saying, that there's like the 5 elements from Hinduism, earth, air, fire, water, and aether, whatever. Then there's also, of course, the Chinese elements, which is earth, fire, water, metal, and wood. So you've got different elements there. And with those 5 elements, there's a cycle of creation and a cycle of destruction. One feeds the other. And there's properties that all the physical world is represented by one of these elements. You'll notice that they don't have air. You'll also notice that they don't necessarily have spirit. Earth kind of works as their spirit. And when they say wood, wood is more like the air element. It's trees and growing and growth and things like that. Freedom. As the trees reach up for the freedom of the trees into the air. Yeah, freedom reaches to the trees. Anyway, so you have different interpretations and way of doing things. And a lot of people are very, very protective over their beliefs and practices. And once again, there's some criticism that can come from people sharing and, letting people know their ideas. Everyone's got their own opinion. So, and each one of these, if you think of any religion or faith, I'm going to use Catholicism because Catholicism is very well known. A lot of people have heard of it. It's one of the larger faiths. I believe in America, I think over 80% of the country, maybe? Or at least they're Christian, monotheistic. So when you think of like a Catholic or even any monotheistic faith with a single God, and they refer to God as a name, being, entity, for their interpretation of the divine, they have their rituals and ceremonies. They have staves, they have books they read from, they have an altar, they have the sacrament, they have, the acceptance of wine as a Catholic thing. They'll take the body and blood of Christ. How do you explain that to someone else? I could demonstrate that to you, but you will not get the essence of what that is. Magic is very similar. They are physical representations of things that you do and words that you say to bring about certain energies. These energies will affect the world. You're not going to get, to my knowledge, fireballs out of the palm of your hand or flying with your physical body. You can generate heat with your hand, a great deal of heat. And I believe it's possible to ignite candles with your mind. I've never done it, I've never seen it, but I believe it's possible. Flying, there's astral projection. Magic has abilities and things that it can do. But for the basic stuff, especially the stuff you're going to learn from books or videos, it's something you feel and experience. Magic is a way of life. It's not something you pick up for entertainment. You want fireballs out of the hands, you want things floating and levitating. I've got some great illusion videos that you can watch. Illusionists. Hardcore stuff, great effects, tricks the eye, very enjoyable to watch. But to do magic, this is a spiritual path, and this is where the whole worthy thing comes from. I started studying back in 1992, I think it was. So it's going on 17, 18 years that I've been studying. And the entire purpose of me saying that is this video here. I'm sharing and giving you this, my interpretation, my opinion. And that's what this is. And the reason I'm doing that is because I've been there. I've spent years alone, solo, no one to talk to, Nobody talks about it. It's so taboo. You know, you can't talk about it. You can't explain it. You can't do this. You can't do that. Nobody will teach you. Nobody will talk to you, and you feel alone, and it's very frustrating. So I'm trying to give to the world my interpretation and some of my insights of things that I've learned, so you don't feel alone, so you can feel that confirmation. Recently, I would say, well, to begin with, it's like pretty much everything was looking within, self-discovery, meditation, listening to the elements, connecting with the divine, with deity. That's where I learned for first 15 years or so. I had a small period where I was briefly introduced to one faith that my ex-wife practiced. It didn't really sit well with me, but it was at least an opening and a start. I think she spent maybe a couple weeks with me and talked about it on occasion. There wasn't really much that I got into with that. And then I started branching out on my own. And once again, had no teacher besides for that little bit of interaction with my peers. Recently, in the past 3-4 years, I've been having some official traditional training in 2 particular paths, separate teachers, and it is refreshing to have confirmation for things you've discovered on your own. That's why I do these videos. Many of you that practice or try to practice have it in your heart, your soul. It feels right. And you follow that insight. But we all have those doubts. And there might be some of you arrogant motherfuckers out there who, oh, I've never ever doubted in my entire life. Hey, you know what? Maybe there is someone out there like that. But I am not one of them. I have had my doubts. My wife loves to say constantly to me, how do you know? She says this about her path, anyone's path. It's a good question. How do you know? And it's not meant to be like there's supposed to be an answer right or wrong with this. It's supposed to be like a tree falling in the woods doesn't make it sound. It's to open your mind and to really look at things. And it's a good point. It's something we should all do. So, without rambling on for too long, a little bit back to what I was talking about before, and I bring this up because I wanted you to know the purpose and the essence behind these videos. I don't want you to feel alone or feel frustrated or to feel like you have to grip onto one path because everyone's heard of it. You can be yourself and you can find a teacher. And that's also something else I want to mention too. A lot of the teachers out there, they'll be called master or some form of master. And if you don't feel comfortable calling them that, you shouldn't be learning from them. And I mean that sincerely. You're not calling them master because they're your master. You're calling them master because they mastered their art. And if you don't feel they've mastered their art, share with them as a peer, but don't become their student. Consider that, and honestly consider that and keep that in mind. My one instructor, I actually call master because he has mastered his art. He's been doing it, I think, longer than I've been alive. I think it was started in the 80s. I want to say 81, 82 is when he started on his path. And it's refreshing to, once again, like I said, have someone teach me things I've discovered on my own and then take it a step further. There's only so far you'll get on your own. And then you eventually need to find a master or a tradition that goes on further. Now, you don't have to have that. You can be perfectly and utterly content, complete, and fulfilled. If you look back at these ancient teachers, what did they have? What is it that, Bohid Harama, Talmo, Siddhartha, Jesus, any of these people, what did these ancient sages, Lao Tzu, what did they have that helped them to develop their personal path that now the world shares and tries to mimic? Nothing. They knew how to listen. And you can find that within yourself without teachers. But something to keep in mind too is it's something that soaks in over time. The reason I mentioned earlier about, the 18 years I've been following different paths and looking at different things is because wisdom, knowledge soaks in over time. You can't, once again going back to why secrets aren't just handed in books and stuff, you can't gain wisdom and enlightenment overnight from reading a book, from watching a video. You can be inspired, and it can open your mind, and it can also make you what's called awakened. I'll get into that in a later video, maybe the next one. However, wisdom and enlightenment and understanding is not just handed to you on a silver platter. This is something that seeps into your bones over time. So continue to study, learn. There's so much out there to learn from. Magic and the practice of magic is understanding how the universe works and how to interact with it. One of my favorite definitions for magic that I use is it is the conscious direction of energy through the use of will. That's as simple as affirmations. That's as simple as you having a bad day, you're in pain, I think I can type of an attitude, and you keep saying in your mind, you keep focusing, this is not going to hurt, I'm going to make it. That is magic. You walk into a room, you don't feel welcome, the vibration in the room, that is magic. Magic is not Hollywood special effects. Magic is the natural order of things. Once again, this is my opinion that I'm sharing with you. So we talked about ritual tools. Everyone wants to know how to use them. They are physical representations to help you focus your energies. Some traditions, such as my traditions, say you don't need the ritual tools. Other traditions swear by them. You have to have them. It depends on the tradition. It depends on your teacher. I'm personally telling you, you don't need them. If you're going to use them, they are an extension of your own being. When you are using the wand, your energy should flow and connect with that wand. When you are waving the wand, it's not just waving. There's a pattern. There's a system. There are elemental triangles that you can invoke. There are symbols for each of the elements based upon a tradition that you can trace into the air. That's what the waving of the wand is for. You can also go over it, kind of like if you think of spraying water from a hose and you're spraying the garden with water. You can spray it with energy. It comes from within, it helps to direct, it gives it a shaft to run along, kind of like the hose. The water's flowing along the hose. I mean, yeah, you can take little handfuls and sprinkle water on it, but it's easier to use the hose. It's similar when you're using an athame, when you're using a wand. The staff, personally, once again, this is personal path and traditions. It is a symbol of wisdom and knowledge, but it is also a connection between the above and below. When a person holds a staff, they can use this, and in my tradition, and what I discovered on my own, was that it connects with the ground, it connects with the sky, you hold on to the center, you become one with all things, and it's very empowering. The energy of all things of the entire universe can flow through that rod as if it's a lightning rod collecting energy. That's one method of using it. That is not how you have to use it. That is how I use it. Once again, starting to touch into personal practices a little bit. It can also be used as you walk around the circle to tap. Some people go into each of the directions and they'll tap 3 times on the ground while calling to that direction, calling the quarters, calling the watchtowers. There's many different practices and methods out there. That's why people don't present this stuff. This is where the whole secret comes into play. It's personal, it's theirs. They don't want to share. They don't want it to be used against them. They don't want it to be ridiculed. They don't want their personal thoughts known. You know what this is? This is a book. This is also what is referred to as a spiritual journal. A lot of people, especially along the Wiccan or witchcraft paths, will say it's called a book of shadows. So what is a book of shadows? A book of shadows, shadows being darkness, mystery, not known, or secrets. It's a book of secrets. It's a book of spells, basically. So I just call it a journal. I mean, I think at one time, one of them I called a book of shadows. I might even have called this one a book of shadows. I've got several. And there's no right or rhyme of how you have to have your book of shadows. Some people like to write in a magical script. Okay? I've actually and I'll actually show you one piece in here. Some of the stuff that you can put in your book of shadows, you can put whatever you want, is I've got a whole bunch of different scripts. Look at that. So you can encode the whole book in this. I've got English, obviously, for the translation, Dragon script, Angelic script, Ogham script, and Futhark script. And you can write your entire book if you want to do it that way. Some people do it backwards. Some people have ciphers, and they have to have the keyword to decipher it. There's many ways of doing it. You can write it in plain English. You can type it on your computer. You can also encrypt it on your computer, which I'll show you in a second. You know, you can have a normal spiral-bound notebook. There's no rhyme or reason. The entire purpose of this, it's a journal. It's a diary. What do you put in a book of shadows? Anything you want to remember. Talk about a dream you had, a poem you wrote, words of inspiration. In the Druid path, they have these things called triads. You know, 3 followers of wisdom: imagination, inspiration, and endeavor. As we grow in wisdom, we are inspired. The inspiration brings us to imagination. when we imagine these things, I'm sorry, it's the other way around, I apologize. The imagination brings us to be inspired, and this inspiration brings about new endeavors. So you could write that down in here. Something to memorize, something to repeat, something to look at every so often. Your favorite recipes for spells, herbal concoctions, incense, oils, whatever the case may be. Chants, prayers, marriage ceremonies. You know, things on the elements. You know, I've got these pages in here where I specifically dedicate to an entire element. What fingers use, what sound, what color, what vibration. What are my impressions of that? The different symbols in different cultures, the different names for it in different cultures, different ways of using it. So there are things that you can put in here for your reference. You don't have to have this, but it's a journal. Enjoy, scribble, write, cross out, do whatever feels right. Have multiple ones, rewrite it every so often, condense it, put it on your computer, encrypt it, protect it in actual Word document, and that's why I got my computer here. Let me grab the camera and bore you with this. Okay, so you can pull up a Word document, and the cool thing about your Word document is not only can you like type stuff, but you can actually highlight that. You can highlight the whole text or Control A to select all, and then you can change your text, and then you can pick out something that's all symbols, which means other people at first glance won't read it and they won't know what it is. There you go, symbols, something like that. And now this is all you see. Whenever you want to translate it again, for your purposes, you just go back in and you pick a language, and there you go, you're back to letters. You know, you can also encrypt files. So I'm not going to save that. Let me see if I have a Word document somewhere here. Here's a text. You can right-click that and go to Properties. And under Advanced, on the General tab, right, you have Advanced, and then you can go here and say Encrypt Contents to Secure Data. Okay, so you can encrypt stuff, and then this way it, you know, people can't hack into it and stuff. So, I mean, there's different things that you can do and different ways you can keep these notes. So going back to the ritual tools, since this is now probably running close to a half hour, with ritual tools, like I was saying, each one has their own representations, okay? Traditionally speaking, people think earth, air, fire, water. They think athame, wand, chalice, and either pentacle disc or a stone. Each one of these representing one of the elements and one of the cardinal directions. Guess what? There's way more ritual tools than that. You can use a bowline. You can use a sword. You can use a staff. You can use a talisman, a ring, an amulet, a stone, a crystal, a pendulum. There are limitless rod, staff, scepter, you know, limitless, literally, headband, crystal on the forehead with a band, you know, whatever you want to do, bracelet with ring connections, anything at all can be used as a ritual tool. You find what calls to you. Consider the material it's made out of. If you are going to get a wand, what do you want your wood to be made out of? Maple wand. I've got an actual silver maple in my backyard. Is a great wand for healing. You know, you can also consider making it out of a metal. What are the properties of that metal? Are you going to attach runes or symbols or wood burn them in? What do these symbols have to do with that wand? Maybe have a wand for healing, a wand for protection, a wand for banishing. You can have an elaborate array, or you can have just one for an all-purpose. If you're going to use it for an all-purpose, once again, what is it made out of? Do you want it to have crystals? If you use crystals, glue them on, wrap them on with cord. How are you going to connect them? If you're going to use an athame, some people have the whole black and white handled athame thing. Do you want a difference between the two? If you do, which one are you going to use and what is associated with you? If you have a master or a teacher, they can explain all this to you. When you're experiencing magic and you let it seep into your bones and you really learn how to connect, some people will feel a warmth go through them, a vibration, a hum. Everything will become alive and awake. There are ways of awakening yourself to these subtle energies. These are techniques you learn from a master. The better you get, you will feel it almost as if a physical force. And the experience of magic and things that it is capable of is beyond the understanding of the normal mind. Even one who is enlightened or awakened has issues or can have issues comprehending. Therefore, they don't strive to comprehend, they accept and embrace. That is some of the higher levels of magic that you can get into. So this is basic introduction 3, to kind of cover a little bit about, some things. Once again, these are my opinions. Feel free to take what you want, take it as a grain of salt. As the great Taumo said, Taumo being Bohid Harama, one of the Buddha, the one who brought it to the Shaolin Temple, he said to his disciples, "Do not listen to me. For all you know, I could be the world's greatest liar." Blessings, BlazeLeeDragon. We'll be back for part 4, perhaps. Feel free to leave comments.